It began quietly, not with cannons or the clash of steel, but with angry voices fueled by resentment and disillusionment, echoing in crowded beer halls. In Germany, a nation wounded by war, its spirit broken and its economy shattered, the seeds of another far more terrible conflict were being sown in fertile ground. The year was 1933, a seemingly ordinary year that would become synonymous with infamy. Adolf Hitler came to power through a mix of political maneuvering and popular support, promising pride, work, and a glorious future for a people desperate for hope. But beneath these promises, carefully crafted to appeal to the masses, lay a dark vision, a sinister ideology that would soon engulf not just Germany but the entire world in flames of hatred and war. The air grew heavy with dread, a palpable sense of coming disaster, a storm gathering on the horizon. The world watched, with a mixture of apprehension and disbelief, uncertain. Some saw a savior who could restore Germany's former glory, others a dangerous madman whose ambitions knew no bounds. In Berlin and across Germany, life went on seemingly normal. Children played in the streets, families gathered for meals, people went to work, but a shadow dark and menacing stretched across the land, poisoning the very air they breathed. It was a shadow of intolerance and hate, carefully nurtured, systematically spread, and deliberately aimed at specific groups within society. For millions of ordinary people, their lives, their homes, their communities were about to be dismantled piece by piece. They did not yet fully realize they stood at the edge of an abyss, a precipice overlooking unimaginable horrors. For the Jewish people of Germany and soon all of Europe who had lived there for generations, this was the beginning of the end of a world they had known and cherished for centuries. A world of tradition, faith, and community. They were doctors, shopkeepers, scientists, musicians, integral members of society, respected neighbors. But the new regime, fueled by prejudice and hate, would soon tell them and the world that they were outsiders, the enemy within. Whispers of hate, once confined to the fringes of society, grew into shouts amplified by propaganda and fear, shouts into shattered glass, the sound of a society breaking apart. The shattering of glass on Kristallnacht would soon become the breaking of lives, the destruction of families, and the annihilation of a people. This is not just history, a story from the past. It is a warning for the present and the future. The path to evil is paved with small steps, incremental acts of cruelty and indifference, fear, silence, and the willingness to look away from injustice, to ignore the suffering of others. To understand what happened during the Holocaust is to understand the fragility of civilization, the ease with which it can be shattered. How could a modern nation, a beacon of culture and innovation, descend into such organized barbarism, such systematic cruelty? How could the lives of millions of innocent people be forever changed, their destinies irrevocably altered by a storm gathering on the horizon? A storm of hatred, prejudice, and ultimately genocide. The answers lie in the choices made, the opportunities missed, and the silence kept by those who knew better. The story of the Holocaust is a human story, a stark and terrible warning for all generations, a reminder of what can happen when humanity fails. It is a reminder that the unthinkable can happen, that even the most horrific atrocities are possible, even in the heart of a cultured continent, a place of art, music, and intellectual achievement. And it began, subtly, insidiously, with the world watching, often doing nothing as the darkness descended. Hitler did not invent anti-Semitism. He weaponized an old poison. For centuries, Jews were scapegoats for plagues, poverty, and unrest. Hitler twisted this hatred into a political tool, blaming Jews for Germany's woes. In Mein Kampf, he described Jews as a corrupting, inferior race, a threat to German purity. This was not just rhetoric, it became state ideology. Propaganda, rallies, and lies drilled this message into the German mind. The Nazis claimed Jews controlled finance, communism, and the media, an invisible enemy to justify any cruelty. Hatred was taught in schools, broadcast on radio, printed in newspapers. The goal dehumanized Jews, making persecution acceptable. The Holocaust's roots were planted in minds long before the gas chambers. The nightmare began, not with bombs or bullets, but with words meticulously crafted on paper. Persecution began with words on paper, not violence. Laws, decrees, and regulations became the weapons of choice. In 1935, the Nuremberg laws were enacted, marking a turning point. These laws stripped Jews of citizenship, effectively rendering them stateless within their own country. The laws went further and forbade relationships with non-Jews, aiming to isolate and dehumanize the Jewish population. This was all in the name of racial purity. Neighbors were divided by legal bigotry. Trust eroded as the law became a tool of division and oppression. Jewish doctors, professors, and children were pushed out of public life, denied education and opportunities, their futures stolen. A flood of decrees followed, each one designed to further marginalize and isolate the Jewish community, banning Jews from parks, theaters, and schools, forcing them to register property, a prelude to confiscation and economic ruin. Life became unbearable, a constant barrage of restrictions and humiliations. It was all meticulously designed to force Jews to leave everything behind: their homes, their livelihoods, their very identities. Then came Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, a night of orchestrated violence and terror. Synagogues burned, businesses destroyed, a clear signal of the horrors to come. Thousands arrested. Persecution turned openly violent. The mask was off, and the true face of hatred was revealed. The world could no longer ignore it, though many chose to look away. Many countries closed their doors to refugees, sealing the fate of countless individuals. Jews were trapped, caught in a tightening web of hate and indifference. Passports were stamped with a red J, a mark of shame and a barrier to escape. Names changed to mark them as targets, stripping them of their identity and dignity. The state branded them, society turned hostile, and the world stood by. Legal discrimination widened into a chasm of state-sponsored hatred, fueled by propaganda and fear. The home they knew became a prison, a confined space where hope dwindled with each passing day. The machinery of exclusion was now in motion, grinding relentlessly towards its horrific conclusion. The world watched as the cracks became a chasm, a gaping wound in humanity's conscience. The descent had begun, a terrifying journey into darkness and despair. After invading Poland in 1939, the Nazi regime began implementing its horrific plans for the Jewish population. Nazis forced Jews into ghettos, crowded, isolated sections of cities designed to segregate and control. These were prisons sealed by walls and barbed wire, cutting off the inhabitants from the outside world. The Warsaw Ghetto, the largest, held hundreds of thousands of people crammed into a few city blocks, a density that defied human dignity. They were starved and deliberately cut off from the world, deprived of basic necessities. Disease and hunger were rampant, sanitation was non-existent, and medical supplies were scarce. Survival was a daily struggle, a desperate search for food and a fight against the ever-present threat of illness. Yet, even in these horrific conditions, people resisted by teaching children in secret, preserving their culture and knowledge, holding clandestine prayers, clinging to their faith in the face of unimaginable adversity, and sharing what little they had, demonstrating incredible solidarity. The ghettos were both a tool of control, a way to isolate and dehumanize, and a slow-motion instrument of death, a deliberate strategy of attrition. Thousands died from starvation, their bodies left in the streets as a grim testament to the Nazi cruelty and disease. Typhus and other illnesses spread rapidly through the weakened population. The conditions were deliberately designed to break their will, to crush their spirit, and to prepare them for extermination. Smuggling food or medicine was punishable by death, a constant threat hanging over those who dared to help, but some risked everything to help others, driven by compassion and a refusal to let humanity die. The outside world was largely indifferent or hostile, turning a blind eye to the suffering within the walls. The ghettos became waiting rooms for death, a place where life slowly ebbed away, holding pens before the next, more terrible step, deportation to the extermination camps. For those trapped inside, hope faded with each passing day, replaced by a gnawing fear. The walls closed in, both physically and psychologically, and the world looked away, abandoning them to their fate. The suffering was unimaginable, a descent into hell on earth, but so was the resilience, the unwavering spirit that refused to be extinguished. Even in despair, people fought to remain human, clinging to their dignity and offering kindness in the face of unspeakable cruelty. The ghettos were only a prelude. The Nazis' final solution meant the systematic murder of every Jew in Europe. Beginning in 1941, Jews were rounded up, told they were being resettled, and ordered to pack a single suitcase. They were crammed into cattle cars, no food, no water, no light for days. Many died on the journey. The rest arrived at places like Auschwitz, Treblinka and Sobibor. These were not labor camps, but death factories. The promise of resettlement was a lie. Their belongings were stolen, their fate sealed. The journey ended in terror and confusion. Families were separated, hope extinguished. The final chapter of their lives began at the gates of the camps. The machinery of death was now in full operation. Millions vanished into the darkness. The world would never be the same. Arrival at Auschwitz meant instant terror. Families were torn apart. A Nazi doctor decided life or death with a gesture. The young and healthy were sent to forced labor, the rest to gas chambers disguised as showers. Survivors had their heads shaved, names replaced by numbers tattooed on their arms. Grueling labor, starvation and brutality defined daily life. The SS guards ruled with sadism. Beatings and public hangings were common. Death was everywhere. The smell of burning bodies, the sight of corpses each morning. Morality was inverted. Survival depended on luck and cunning, yet even here prisoners shared bread, protected each other, whispered songs. The system was designed to destroy body and spirit. It was a kingdom of night, as Elie Wiesel called it. The camps were the horrifying conclusion of Nazi hate. Human beings were turned to ash. The world's darkest hour unfolded behind barbed wire. Even in darkness, there was resistance and courage. In the Warsaw Ghetto, fighters held off the Nazis for nearly a month. A fight for dignity, not victory. Most resistance was quieter. A mother saving bread for her child, a secret diary like Anne Frank's, a whispered prayer. Some escaped to join partisans. Others were saved by non-Jewish rescuers like Oskar Schindler and Irina Sendler. Survivors like Primo Levi and Elie Wiesel bore witness, reminding us it happened, therefore it can happen again. These stories are not just memories, they are lessons. They show the heights of human resilience and the depths of cruelty. We must listen and remember. The world's response was slow, marked by disbelief and political calculation. Many nations, wary of war and economic hardship, chose appeasement. Reports of persecution were dismissed or ignored. The Evian Conference failed to help refugees. Even as war raged, the scale of the Holocaust was hard to grasp. Only in 1945, as Allied troops liberated camps, did the full horror become undeniable. Eisenhower insisted soldiers witness the camps, so the truth could never be denied. The world was shocked by the evidence: skeletal survivors, mountains of corpses, gas chambers. The Nuremberg trials established that just following orders was no defense for mass murder. The world awakened, too late for millions. The Holocaust was not a spontaneous outburst, but a calculated state-sponsored crime. 6 million Jews and millions of others were murdered because of hate and indifference. Remembering is a duty to the victims and to the future. The lessons are timeless. Unchecked hatred and silence enable evil. Ordinary people can be complicit or courageous. Today, as hatred and bigotry persist, the memory of the Holocaust is more vital than ever. We must speak out against intolerance, preserve survivors' stories, and educate new generations. There is hope in the resilience of survivors and the courage of rescuers. The ultimate lesson: honor the dead by building a world where every life is valued. Never forget, so it never happens again.